So the bit I want to start on is mainly because like it's a grey area for me, and I'm in the industry, and I'm like, okay, so it's probably a grey area for a lot of people. But I guess it's that initial what like, and I don't want to make it such a broad question, but like the pathway into industry, mainly because I'm like, what the fuck does a designer portfolio look like? Like, if I said to one day, right, I'm gonna want to be a designer in the games industry, where do I start? Because for an artist, it's really obvious. It's like make art, and like the art's really obvious. So you want to be an environment artist, make environments. You want to be a character artist, make characters. I want to be a designer. Like, where do I start if I want to get on this road?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. Yeah, because it's like you mentioned, art has a lot of great uh, examples of portfolios and ArtStation, and these great resources to give feedback and to build up your portfolio and stuff. Yeah, design's a little bit more difficult. I think the pathways into design have changed. I think over the years, a lot of people, even still, will go, the kind of typical through QA route, and I think a lot of that comes down to just not having a great way, in the past to have a design portfolio, then getting into dev and then learning, design and showing your affinity for design and moving up to design, or moving laterally to design, I should say, from that. Um, but I kind of grew up in an era of like modding was more of a thing. So like certainly there was early modders, but I grew up around like Battlefield 2 and taking those tools and just making levels in those modding tools, and kind of or communities among that's just making fan mods to stuff, and that kind of would build up and build up. I got very fortunate. I was able to do that for a couple of years, and then managed to actually find a great school program that had game design as a track. So went to Champlain College in Vermont that has a game dev cohort of majors. They have game art, game programming, game design, and a couple others. But that allowed me to specify and focus, I guess, my direction and work with people who were artists, so that I didn't have to do designer art. We could work together on a project and make a halfway decent student game that showed their artistry in an actual game. So it wasn't just 3D models. They could actually show how they could make art for games specifically, and then I could using that art have a prettier thing to show my puzzle concept or whatever, and have an actual game built around it, which was super helpful. And I think that.
So I was wanting to elaborate on something. Because you just said about like obviously you have a pretty game to show at the end of it. You're like, oh, I show off my puzzle, and it's something I can imagine. I mean, look, artists are. I'll put my hand up to this. We're egotistical. We like having something to show at the end. We're like, look at the pretty game I made, and like I made that like a brick wall there. That brick texture, I made that.
Right.
Designers, right? Like you're like, oh, well, I designed all of this, but it's like it's got my kind of my DNA in there. But it's like it's this weird thing where it's like, okay, what am I showing you? Like, well, the game is what I did. Like, do you have to wrestle with that quite a lot? I guess.
Definitely, I think there's definitely better ways to show it off than others. So, when I was applying around and stuff, for instance, when I had like, actually, funny enough, I had a student game that was a sort of Tomb Raider-y type of like experience, third person action adventure, thing with a couple of different puzzles and stuff in it. But you have to show off thought process to a degree, which is kind of the weird aspect of it. So I usually suggest to people, you have the game and it's there, and especially if you can make it downloadable and playable. Like we worked in Unity. It's great that Unity and Unreal and everything are is free and easily accessible now. You can make something that people can actually download and play if they really want to dive into it. But most of the time, they're probably not going to dive into it that hardcore and go play through your whole game, because they're looking at hundreds of portfolios and stuff. So if you can get you know a video that shows obviously the concept of your game and and gives some context of what your design is fitting inside of, what type of game it is or whatever, and then you can have a further breakdown of kind of your process. Pick like one thing. For me, I would pick had a game that had these kind of like light puzzles, like kind of classic old school, Tomb Raider type of thing, where you had to turn these crystals or whatever and make a path and stuff. So I would kind of show the a sketch of the initial concept of like that it was actually like a picture of my notebook of like this is the idea of how you go through this, and here is the kind of first iteration of it, and then a slightly more challenging version, and then a slightly more challenging version, and kind of create kind of like it's more of creating like a blog post of like this is the idea, here's how it evolved, here's how I advanced it, and then here's maybe a challenge that I hit that I realized I couldn't do this, so I had to speed it up and do this other thing. So it is more of a story, and it does require it's a little bit more than just looking at somebody's art station or whatever. You have to try to present something. Part of that is also making sure that you don't just have a giant wall of text that nobody's going to read. Like try to put in like a GIF or video or just it's kind of like portfolio design. Is a separate part of how good of a designer you are. In terms of getting that readable and understandable. So